Can superhero movies be taken seriously? I'm sure they can. But the route they're going here, I can see why people don't. Hey, what's up, Nerd fam? It's your boy Gashawn. I want to welcome you to Into the Nerd. Today, I just want to have a discussion about something that obviously there was an article a couple months back, and there's other actors that have said something very similar. Martin Scorsese pretty much, he criticized, superhero films about how they're like not real cinema, and tons of other directors have done that, and even some actors like Steven Dorff have also, called them like video games and stuff like that. And I wanted to discuss, like, is there any validity to what they're saying? And if so, what can change about the superhero genre right now to change that opinion? So, in his article, I'm just paraphrasing here, he pretty much just talks about, like the character development. Like, what's the point of the things that are happening? And is it mostly spectacle? Like, I'll even, link some of the things that are happening here. I think he lists, like, Alfred Hitchcock and, like, the whole cinematic experience just being something different, like suspense, and I get it. And obviously, that's just his type of movies. I'm not saying that his opinion is gospel, and I respect it. Here's the truth. A lot of superhero films are purely spectacle, and it's because it's easy. It doesn't take a lot of thinking to do explosions and energy blasts and flight. It doesn't. And that's a very base level of comic books, of understanding what comic book movies are, even comic book characters. But comic book characters are seriously developed. I mean, a lot of these characters have been around for 30 and 40 years, so they have tons of stories that obviously flesh them out, and they change over these years. There's certain events that, they thought one way, now they think this way, just like people, right? But in a lot of these movies, they do not show these type of things. They don't show this type of growth. It's just, by name. And there are some characters that have had more than one movie that you can definitely see something like this. And you can see they never really touch on some of the things that get touched on in comics. In the movies, it's just the surface. So I want to talk about a few of them. I'd say one would be Superman, right? I mean, obviously, we get it. You have the suit, you got the curl, you have the whole Clark Kent changing into the phone booth, the powers and all that. You got to have Lois. But in terms of him as a character, what is often missing? How lonely he is one thing, right? How even though like he identifies as human in terms of how he was raised, he knows he's not. And his longing for finding Kryptonian anything, which is why, when he found the city of Kandor, why that was so important in the comics. Also understanding, that inner battle of wanting to, to just give in to rage because, people treat him a certain way or people talk to him. It's like, I could really just break everybody in here, but I'm not. And really hammering that home. Also, he's not an idiot. Like his brain quite literally works faster than anybody else. So he's actually a genius. Like he built the Fortress of Solitude. So there are a lot of pieces to him. He's a very multifaceted character. He's actually not even boring. Like he's a pretty nuanced character. And there was even certain stories where, he had to grow and learn and understand like how he wasn't going into certain neighborhoods. Like there was a story that when he wound up in Suicide Slums, which is where Black Lightning is from, and he had to like save a little girl from getting shot, and he actually did it in like he did it in his Clark Kent persona. It was pretty interesting. He has a lot of cool stories that aren't just him, shooting eye beams and flying and stuff like that. But I think character has to be a focus in a lot of these movies, and it can happen, but it just takes more work, and it takes some of these directors and writers actually maybe tapping in and asking these people who created the characters, what are the main building blocks of the characters? Another character I can say that they often don't get like the nuances of would be like Batman, because how many Batman films have there been? Now they get closer and closer, but you have to understand like this guy is kind of bordering on like mental illness. Like he is, because he's never actually moved past the traumatic incident that's happened there. Is he a guy that should be, having like raising kids and stuff like that? Probably not. Like he's extremely complicated. Even his relationship that he's had with like Dick Grayson, like, exploring how, he raised him, and then eventually like Dick Grayson's like, look, I can't really be around you. Like you're a weird, you don't trust anybody, you don't even trust me. Like showing that, like showing his relationship with like different members of the Bat family. Like we didn't even get a chance to really see that, and even understanding his growth and his relationship even with Superman, how them being polar opposites, how, Clark grew up with the family. He didn't grow up with the family, but he had the money, but Clark didn't grow up with the money. So their dichotomy is kind of like, even showing something like that would be really cool. All right. But I think one of the things that a lot of these directors are doing, they want things to fit the 2-hour format. And I understand that, right? But they clearly are making a universe. So they want to use these characters for as long as they can. So this is why you refer to the source material, because they've already done the work for you. You just adapt it, and, add some things if you want to, but the wheel has already been invented for you. So you don't have to reinvent it, right? You just use that fleshed out story and do slow burn stories, which can still have spectacles in it, but the spectacles can mean something. Like, those battles have to mean something. Like, for example, I'm just going back to Superman. You have to understand, why did it mean something for him to kill Zod? Why did it hurt him? You don't really understand that. You don't understand his aversion to killing. You don't understand that. And it's not just that he killed him, in a comic book when something like that happened, it's because he's also Kryptonian. Like, that's the closest thing he has to family. You didn't get that there because that didn't exist. But those are those complicated things, because in the comic, he has trapped Zod in the Phantom Zone before rather than kill him because he didn't want to based off of that. But you don't get that. I mean, hell, that's the last Superman with Zack Snyder couldn't even do that. He was the furthest thing from Superman. Him wanting to be like the symbol of hope. That wasn't even there. He was a very depressing Superman, but whatever. Moving on. My favorite superhero, Spider-Man, is often done wrong and has a ton of things. I mean, he goes through a ton of growth with all his rogues gallery because, once again, he becomes, like a lot of superheroes, becomes a superhero through loss, through losing his Uncle Ben, and it's actually kind of his fault. So obviously his morality, like a lot of other people's morality, it gets built up through, who you're raised by. That was his Uncle Ben, and then even he wants to put the suit down, he thinks about what his Uncle Ben went through and, how it was kind of his fault. And then even he builds his own morality, growing up, like just becoming a person and then losing like Captain Stacy, who was another father figure, and then Gwen, who was his girlfriend, and then even getting mentors who were actually villains, like Otto Octavius and Kurt Connors, and even why am I forgetting the guy from the damn Clone Saga? Him, I'm forgetting his name. But a lot of that, he was constantly like looking for a dad, and it was always in the wrong people. This is why I kind of resonated with him as a character, because he was extremely human, and he felt a lot of things that a lot of normal teenagers would feel, especially if they have to grow up, like have a teenage life and be a superhero at the same time. And it's deep, there's death involved, there's him just being a regular human being, and this stuff is not nearly touched on as much as it could be, and how every single villain really helps him develop. And I like that. Like, I think if they were able to really focus on the character of all these superheroes, they could be taken seriously. Hell, who said a superhero movie couldn't win an Oscar? They could, if they had those themes executed and still had fighting. Because some people think that you have to choose one or the other. You don't. But I think a lot of the character building will make the action mean so much more when someone dies or whatever. And also, stop killing the villains, right? Perhaps you shouldn't kill the villains, because you don't, the universe can't go on so much, because if you think about it, Marvel has a villain problem, because they're all dead. All the Avengers villains are pretty much dead. They don't have to be. They still exist in the world. You lock them up, the ideologies are still around, they're still a constant threat, and that's something that would affect the characters, right? Because it's ongoing. Killmonger, dead. Mandarin brings him back in the comics when he dies, but the five, the 10 rings aren't even what they are. So that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different issue. But I'm just saying, it is quite possible for these movies to be taken seriously if you deal with these heavier themes and put the spectacle in there by leaning closer to the source material. Now, a lot of times they're like, the general audience doesn't know. Good. They can learn through this medium of whether it's streaming or putting them in the movies. Now, I chose those three because those are the ones that are constantly keep getting movies made. And even like the X-Men could probably fit in there. And the X-Men definitely has some heavy themes that are really explored there. And it doesn't just have to be, oh, I got claws or I've got Nightbeam. It's a lot of different themes even within themselves, like superiority. They deal with all type of isms in there. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that because it's inherent within within the books. Do it. And on top of that, still have a cool villain that wants to just take over the world. I think that's fine. Now, I get it. There's not really a practical way to do all this stuff. So there's still going to be spectacle, but it doesn't have to rely on it. If I'm making sense here, you do not have to rely on spectacle in order to make a great superhero movie. Look at The Boys. The Boys is very character driven. Is there gore? Or is there some cool special effects? Sure. But look what they did with Homelander, right? And mind you, it's not even exact to the book. They made some changes in the Boys series. They absolutely did. But the characters still act like the characters. And the characters are what drive the story, not their powers, not their abilities. Not like the cool action scenes. Like even Homelander, right? He's a maniac. But as powerful as he is, you're still focused on like just how he straddles the line from just killing everyone and then always wanting to be accepted. That's a cool dynamic they have with him. And even though like he's still a villain, they gave this real human aspect in season 2, and it came to his son. You know, like this is my son, I have to. But he was still a piece of shit. Even with Billy Butcher, watching that dichotomy, like he's a hero, but then he's also a piece of shit. Like it's almost, in some ways, he's almost just as bad as Homelander. That's cool. That's who they are. They have to focus on who these characters are versus what they can do. If they can do that, then it won't just be spectacle. This will truly be cinema. I think a lot of these actors will actually want to be in them. They don't just go, well, I'm gonna look stupid in a costume. What they are in a costume will actually represent something more than just a page in a book. And understand that comic books in general should probably be taken more seriously because it is a literary work. People put a lot of time and effort to write these comics and these well-developed stories and these characters that are insanely developed. But then to just waste the development and just put them like the least common denominators on screen, it does do quite a bit of a disservice. Let me know. Does that make sense to you? What do you think could be done to improve the superhero genre? Do you think it should stay as is? Or do you think there's room for improvement for people, even outside of just comic book readers, to take it seriously? Especially for the longevity of the genre. Because I believe superhero fatigue is a real thing, and the constant spectacle, I think, is what's gonna make people, be very tired of watching it. Let's talk about it. Into the Nerd.